Okay, so welcome back after the break, and welcome to this panel session on the role of the private sector in food security. I think we've really got a privilege because we've got a big chunk of the food system represented here. So from Pierre Herben, who works for Yara in crop nutrition, Juan Gonzalez-Valero, who works for Syngenta, and Matlock for ADM, and myself from Nestle. So we're really representing a wide span of the food system with some of the biggest companies in the field. Now, how this panel is going to work, we're going to have short presentations, around 15 minutes, from each of the panel members. We'll go directly from one to another, and then we'll have a Q&A and a discussion. And I think you'll see that the role that the private sector is playing in developing emerging technologies, but above all, you're going to see a lot of concrete examples on how these technologies are mobilized into the developing world. So I'd like to start off by presenting Pierre Herben, who is Chief Technology Officer for Yara International in Norway. And Pierre graduated in bioengineering in Belgium, and he worked for 25 years in the petrochemical industry, including one of his last positions as Global VP for R&D at Lionel Basel. Since 5 years, he's been leading Yara's Innovation and R&D Expert Organization. Yara has roots going back more than 100 years, and it remains the world's largest supplier of plant nutrients. So I'll hand over to Pierre, who's going to talk about addressing the global challenges of agriculture through innovation in crop nutrition. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you, Juan. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. It's the third day of the Congress, so a lot of things have already been said. I just have to understand where I need to turn the slides. It was too easy, thanks. So you will see some repetition, but at least you will see we are quite aligned, so that's something good to hear. If we look at the global challenge we face, and Professor Ratanlal made a very good introduction to yesterday morning. Yeah, we are going to have to, we'll need to produce more food in the next 35 years to feed mankind that we ever produced before. And this is due to the fact that we are much more population. We have seen the numbers, it's amazing. We have increasing natural constraints. We never thought about limitation of resource in the past, about phosphorus, about whatever we speak in our field of activity. We see that water is scarcer and scarcer. The land is limited. We are losing biodiversity if we are not caring. A lot of constraints around us, and we need to feed the population. So sustainable intensification is what we believe is the way forward. And how do you combine all these things? Because they are linked. We have to increase productivity, which is fine. There are ways, but we have to reduce emissions, mitigate all the impact we might have on the environment. Not only reducing emission, but also adapting to changes, because what you see is the climate is changing, the conditions, the scarcity of water is changing in many countries. And we need to secure sustainability for the farmer and for the society. So it's a lot of things that are all interlinked. So innovation is the way. We need to invest more than before, faster than before, to find ways, and more importantly, apply them. Find ways that farmer can use easily and in a sensible way what has been invented and developed. We see knowledge transfer to a big part of the world as one of the key priorities, because it's nice to innovate, but you really need to adapt to the different type of farmers and regions, and value chain cooperation is more than ever for us a priority. Doing it alone does not fly. Looking at the greenhouse gas emission, yeah, let's look at agriculture. I think we saw it in probably a couple of times in the last days. If we take the agriculture, the emission of methane, N2O gases, it's around 10% of the total emission pattern. Forestry is around 7%, and then the farm and the industry use for production is around 2%. So we are around 20%, and we have to take care of that. It's extremely important. And I like to go to this paper from Burney et al. From Stanford University. They show that if we would produce today, if agriculture would function today to feed the world today with the techniques and the knowledge of 1961, we would emit 4.5 times more greenhouse gases than what we do today. And why we are only where we are today is because of innovation and because of continuous improvement and good practice. So that gives us, I would say, yeah, some positive feeling about the future. I think we are able to make it, but we need to focus and implement. Crop nutrition, we were speaking about, Professor Ratanlal said, yeah, when you're producing fertilizer, you're emitting, you're producing CO2, it's true, an important factor of this industry. But when we feed the plant through the photosynthesis, we saw this morning, even the frontiers are moving forward there, is able to capture much more energy and carbon. And what you see here is the differential of the effect of nitrogen fertilization in an optimal way in a weed, for instance. And at the end, the carbon contribution, the CO2 emission compared to a ton of wheat produced would be around 6 to 8%. And we can go better. Going back to the basics, I think I can go fast because there are many experts here, but basically the plant needs not just nitrogen, not just phosphorus or potash, but they need a lot of things like we need. So they need secondary and micronutrient. If we miss one at a particular stage, we are not optimizing the yield. We are not optimizing the quality of the product we are looking after. And that's the cycle. We were speaking about organic or non-organic. I think it's a combination. When the plant has grown, the crop residues are going back, mineralization back to the plant. But the problem is, of course, we export a lot of material outside. It goes into cattle, it goes into the cities, and ends up somewhere else in the linear economy model. So we need to compensate, not only with NPK, but as well with micronutrients. And we were discussing, Professor Pickett said, yeah, do you know about this famous Haber-Bosch process? Yeah, more than half of the food, of human proteins are made through this simple process. So this is a fact, I would say. Mineral fertilizer are widely and will be even more used in the future. And it's important for men, not just nitrogen, but all the things that you see in the value chain. We are looking more and more at how we can build healthy nutrition, human nutrition through as well crop nutrition. We are focusing, for instance, on grass, and you see here easily the way the calcium can go to human through milk. We are looking at selenium that we have used, for instance, in a consistent way with Finland to regulate the selenium level in the population through legumes and vegetables. Manufacturing we are very process intensive. We speak about billions of investments, huge manufacturing technologies. And when we look at the climate, the impact on climate and the mitigation, what you see here is the evolution that have happened in the last 20 years in terms of environmental impact. And this is a European view where we see that the first, I went too fast, on the first graph, we started with a standard emission scheme with oxide of nitrogen being emitted in the atmosphere. So we developed catalysts which are neutralizing them. And then the next step is what can you do to further reduce your environmental impact by crop nutrition? Well, it's what Terry Roberts was mentioning, is trying to optimize as much as you can the nutrient uptake index. And that we have embarked on a series of development of sensors and technologies to enable the farmer to decide in real time what to apply for the nutrition, and I will come back on that. Just to finish on the emissions, we have worked the carbon footprint for all the fertilizer we are producing, so we are able to give certificates, and we are doing now the same with water footprint to really understand what it takes to go to the crop. This is something that helps as well the value chain partners like Nestle and other players to understand what is the impact of a better nutrition strategy across the value chain to reduce the impact on the environment first, but also increasing and improving the quality of the end product. And it shows here in terms of CO2, just the evolution of the industry over the last 20 years. So, and the next step will be to go to zero. That means a radical innovation and different way of approaching production. Nutrient management. I'm not going too much into crop nutrition because we had a couple of, on the principle, very good presentations yesterday. But I'd like to go on the way we try to optimize the last 10%. So we have engaged in development of sensoring on nitrogen, sensoring on water. What you see here is a tractor equipped with a sensor which can have a precision of that size, 20 meters up front on the canopy, and can have immediately a status of the nitrogen level in the plant. So you can really adapt to GPS and technology the nutrition plant by plant, nearly for crop like corn. We are really at a very strong, good precision level. And then the second thing you see on the bottom right is a water sensor that we are developing, which dialogues with the plant. So this has been developed. We are now commercializing it with olive tree. Citrus is the next one, where we really analyze through the signal of the leaf the water status of the plant. And it gives us indication for olives in Spain where we could save up to 30% of water consumption in water scarce period. Because what we see is the soil is not probably the best environment where to test the water needs for the plant. The plant has needs which are not necessarily linked directly to the water level in the soil. And this will be a next breakthrough for crop nutrition. And then what you see is a series of other tools that we have developed, like ImageIt, that enables farmers on the field just by image analogy to identify nutrition deficiencies and get a first rapid check of what could be done for grass, for canola, for whatever crop that is analyzed. So it's really providing a set of tools then that will be connected through Yara, which is the crop nutrition platform where the farmer can have season after season all the status of the nutrition and of the nutrients into the field and into the harvested crops. So this is typical picture of a sensor. First generation, we are already launching a second generation. So it's not about the sensor so much, but it's about the algorithm and the precision we are able to provide to the farmer. So here it's an example of farmers in Germany very convinced about, I would say, the optimization of their overall field yield. But by using this sensor, they could see, on some specific area of the field, because the field is, you have this within the field variation, they could see really online where you have an excess or a defect of nutrient, which enables, and you see here, it's an average of 23 trials, large field, a reduction of 14% of nitrogen application, and still getting 6% yield on top, which is really fantastic. And this is not rocket science, it's just good practice. And this is now adopted by most of the German farmers. So now we are moving on to the next generations, so more accuracy, and then we are looking at other nutrients where we can probably as well make a further progress. So now I'm moving to another aspect of innovation in crop nutrition, is the value chain. And here I will focus on a country, Tanzania, where we have been present for years. We have invested in a terminal. We have committed in a long-term development pattern. Here what you see is, we talked about it yesterday, Bernard Vanneau made a very good presentation showing the state of the soil, the lack of knowledge, and not only that as well, the lack of logistics, the multitude of problems you have to address. So here, you're not working alone. We are working in public-private partnerships. We have developed there very structured approach, focusing on maize and rice with smallholder farmers, with companies like Syngenta. We were with University of Suquaine, local, University of Life Science of Oslo, and other partners, including quite a few NGOs who have provided really useful bridging of technologies there. And here, what we looked at, it's a multidisciplinary approach, transferring knowledge, establishing a good understanding of the soil, establishing a good understanding of the ecosystem there, and starting to work with the value chain, including micro distribution, micro financing, starting to initiate the value chain. And if we look at the population in Tanzania, that's an interesting one. And it's coming back to the presentation of Professor Lal. There are 45 million, and you see here the diet and more or less the average, I would say, a yield, 1.5 tons per hectare of maize, 2.3 for the rice. And you see the projection of the population in 2050 and what it will mean. So if we stay with the average yield of today, you see the red bar. By 2050, we need to go to 12 million hectares versus 3.5 at the moment. So it's nearly 4 times more, which means an incredible impact on environment. And if you want to stay where we are in terms of agricultural land in Tanzania, you need to reach at least 6 tons per hectare. It's not stratospherically big, but it's a big jump. So this partnership has been launched. Again, the innovation there is not so much on technology, but it's really on the application and the consistency of the knowledge transfer and fixing all the gaps. You see that in a couple of years, we already are meeting the target. What you see, of course, some of the fields, some of the village have issues because the soil is more degraded, so it's not something general. There is work to do to regenerate the soil, but you see that it's not mission impossible. And that needs organization. That's one of the main barriers, is to get organized through the partners to get it done. Very importantly, I mean, it's nice to do that, but that needs to be sustainable. So we developed with the partners a profitability tracker for smallholder farmers. And it's interesting to look at that. What you see here is typically what the farmer in this village would have to invest for a typical 1-2 acre farm field. And what would be his profit. And here you see, of course, when you go for more sustainable intensive agriculture, you have here much higher investment, and you see the fertilizer, the crop protection, is significantly more important, but the jump in yield is really making the difference. And we were a couple of months ago back to Mbeya area where we are conducting these trials, and you see really a progress. What we could see now is there is a marketplace, there is a conglomerate of distribution, there is a bank coming twice a week. You start to have a marketplace with trading. They have built a big warehouse, so the value chain has initiated, and you could see there a very good example of a radical transformation in 4 years, I think. Yeah. So just to end up, I'm glad you told me I have to rush. It's not rocket science. I think it's sustainable intensification is the way. We need technologies, and I did not speak about seeds and GMOs, etc. But I think all is important there. Best practice crop nutrition is one of the key components because you can really fix rapidly a gap and provide sustainability of the soil. But we will need more innovation in manufacturing for sure, because we are committed to reduce emissions, innovation in tools and services, and continued innovation in nutrition. And I think partnerships, and you're all there, so welcome if you have any ideas around that, are key, and the engagement of all the stakeholders in the value chain will be necessary to bridge the gap. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pierre. As I said in the beginning, we're going to go from one speaker to other and then have all the questions in the panel discussion. So now I'm going to introduce Juan Gonzalez-Valero from Syngenta. Juan has a PhD in biology from the University of Hamburg with specialization in ecology and environmental toxicity. During his career, he was head of ecotoxicity in Novartis. He had a number of different positions within Syngenta before his current position, which is head of public policy and sustainability. And Juan is integrating sustainability into the core business practice of Syngenta. He shaped the company's good growth plan, which we will talk a little bit about, and he oversees its implementation and company performance. He's also in parallel a lecturer in leadership skills at the University of St. Gallen, and he's also served on the board for a number of non-profits, including the Fair Labour Association. Juan.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. Good morning, everybody. Where is my fellow colleague? Took it with me. So thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure, and I truly enjoyed the 1.5 days that I was able to be here. I came in late Tuesday night, so I missed the first day. But everything I've heard is really encouraging me that there is a future for innovation in agriculture, something that when you live in Europe, and reminding us what Rob reminded us yesterday, is not always that straightforward. We really suffer a lot, and my daily business or my job, half of my talks or maybe more than half of my engagements are more in the direction what we heard yesterday, while what I'm going to talk today about is really much more close to my heart and is what motivates me to do what I do for the company. So who is Syngenta? Syngenta is a 13, 14 billion multinational company solely dedicated to agriculture. We are the first one that actually had an extensive portfolio of crop chemicals, pesticides, but also seeds, seed treatments, and adjacent technologies in that space. So we have a fairly complete portfolio to serve farmers. We have an ambition that we defined in 2008, and the ambition is still valid. We just reconfirmed it with the relaunch of our strategy after all the turmoil that we went through last year. We had to just think about who we really are after all this up and downs about will we have an independent future or not. We reconfirmed this. It's really what we are there for, you know, to bring greater food security in an environmentally sustainable way in an ever increasingly populous world. But I'm going to focus today more on the big red bubble there, the smallholder farms. Our innovation serves both. The innovation is the kind of innovation that we discussed over the last days. We partner with many universities around the world in order to bring this innovation into the hands of farmers. We have an investment of around 1.4 billion annually in our own R&D, and as you can imagine, a big portion of that is the development, means that taking the stuff out of research, this promising stuff out of research into the development phase, investments 10 plus years into the future in a very uncertain regulatory environment. It's not an easy business to be in at the moment. But still, that's what we do. How do we go about it? And I think that's the first thing I want to mention, because I think it's an important thought starter for everybody. Those that work in agriculture probably take it for granted, but those that are critical to the technologies do not. And therefore, I think it's very important for all of us to really understand what do we do with technology. And when we revamped our strategy, or when we came up with our integrated strategy, we went through this exercise, and this triangle still holds true in my mind. And we were the first company who actually purposefully put technology, so our bread and butter, that's what we do. You know, we make money with technology, there's no doubt about that. But we took it out of the individual characteristics that you typically use to sell this technology to the farmer. Means productivity increases, how much pest control you deliver, what is the quality increase, those kind of very simple metrics that every farmer understands, but not society. We took that out and said, actually, if the technology is really good and fits into what we would call a more sustainable production system, then the technology is just an enabler. It's just the lever that you can use to actually help people manage their land better. And there's lots of thinking that went into this. And as I said, when we started with the integrated crop strategy that many like to follow now, this was at the center of it. And you become more technology agnostic. You understand that what technology works in an environment A doesn't necessarily need to be the best technology in an environment B. The way you look at your business model starts changing as well. And what we also realized, and that took us a little longer, was if this is all true, then you start measuring impact differently as well. And do we have the tools to measure this impact differently? That's the question you start asking yourself. So improving productivity is the classical one. Reducing the environmental footprint is the other big outcome. Building rural prosperity, you could say it is. But measuring that is what needs to be done in order to demonstrate that this is really working. So that's where the Good Growth Plan actually came in. We said, if we believe in this and we truly believe in it, then we have to actually start measuring the impact that we're having on the ground with a different lens, with different metrics. And this metrics is nothing else than what I just explained around the triangle. We measure resource efficiency on the farm, we measure biodiversity and soil conservation benefits, and we measure how the technology gets better to people, the safety of the technology, and how to actually make work on the farm safer and to be inclusive of smallholder markets. by setting commitments, what you actually do within an organization is, and link it so as we did to the strategy. So it's not a sustainability strategy. As a matter of fact, whoever tells you that there is such thing as sustainability strategy is lying. It is measuring the sustainability of your strategy. That's the only thing you can really do. Either you have the right strategy or you don't. So by setting commitments, what you do is to focus the organization on looking into that and set up the measurement frameworks that you need in order to prove that you're making progress. And that's what we're doing. 2 years into the plan, and I'm not going to go through the details. We have a worldwide farm network that works with us to actually measure progress they're making on the ground. That's individual farmers doing excellent jobs just to farm their land, and all we offer is to measure how they're performing against the other factors, the input-output efficiencies, the biodiversity metrics, the soil, and so on. We are on progress to deliver. I'm not going to talk about that. I think that's what you would expect if you start making such claims. I only want to highlight 2 elements, and that's in the gray boxes down there, because they're both important. They're both important for 2 reasons. One is the reason to believe. Working with auditors, working with independent people who actually audit your data is helpful to actually provide credibility that what you're measuring is true. But that's not good enough. Today, people still don't believe, even if you have an auditor. And the way we undermine the authorities, or the institutions that actually assess the safety of our products, like you see in Europe, is the best example. You don't trust anybody unless you get access to the data yourself. So that's why we partnered with the Open Data Institute. So all the data that we're generating is in the open data domain. It's machine readable. It's fully indexed. It goes beyond my understanding of computers and internet, but it's there for everybody to look at, to be used, and because it's machine readable, it can and should be combined with other data sets as well for those that want to use them for their own research. So it's there to be used, and I truly hope more people will join us. We are partnering with them further to actually move the agenda forward. The audit is more important internally than externally, because what an audit actually does is provide the board and the management with what they need to put this framework into our incentive schemes. Like you do financial endpoints that actually inform our performance, you can put these factors into the same performance scheme. And I think we are the only company I'm aware of that has that into the long-term incentive of its executive compensation. And that's only possible because of the audit. Let's move to the smallholder markets. And you will understand now maybe why I started so bit widely to talk about it. If you look at our core competence as an input provider, as Syngenta, it is on the input side. It is one part of this cake where we really are experts. We know what we're doing. But for a functional smallholder market, you need to understand all their pain points. You need to understand what really makes them successful or not successful. And if one bit of this is not really functioning, not available, or just wrong, it's very unlikely to have a sustainable business on the ground with those smallholder markets. Means that innovation for smallholder markets, the title of my presentation, needs to include innovation in business models. It's not just the technology. Technology is the same. You adapt it to that market where you need it, but it is essentially the same technology. The times where you send the cheap stuff into smallholder markets and the good stuff stayed in the developed market is over. We don't have the money to differentiate like that. It is the same technology, but the network that needs to be established in order to make it sustainable, that's where the challenge rises. And this is different ways of looking at business models. And I want to show you three, just to give you a glimpse of what we're talking about. Three examples, increasing complexity. The first one, grow more. And you see there's only Syngenta mentioned at the bottom. That means that it is one where the competence that we as Syngenta have is probably good enough to be successful. Why? Because it's fit for markets where the farmers have good access to their markets, they can sell their stuff, they have access to finance, they have access to many other elements that are important, what I just saw in the pain points. So what's missing is the better agronomy. Grow More is developed for rice. And it is what we call an integrated solution. I come to that in a second. This is the life of a rice farmer in a fairly developed market. So a rice farmer that can sell his produce into the marketplace, so has some form of security. He has to think about the production environment, the epidemiology, the biotic epidemiology, what is the right seed variety to grow. He needs to think about integrated pest management. How does he work with the beneficial insects and other stuff? He needs to go into the input side, think hard about what kind of seed traits does he need in order to grow there. Does he need seed care, so seed treatment? What herbicides, insecticides, growth regulators, fungicides will he need in order to grow his crop? And of course, how to manage resistance, because all of those pesticides, if used strongly, will form very quickly some resistance and become useless. In addition, he needs to think about agronomy, nutrient management, water management, field and soil management, and so on. That all can be integrated into an offer to the farmer. And we have it phased, so you see it at the side. You would call it Grow More 2. That's the basic. That talks more about the growing itself. And the agronomy bit would be Grow More 3 and 4, where you really have very sophisticated farmers. So how does it look like, such kind of a business model, a real integrated business model? You provide simple protocols for the different stages of the growing cycle for those farms. So in order to establish the yield potential, you need good seedlings protocols. You need to provide them with the high-quality seeds, the seedlings, to actually grow the rice and actually get the best out of that. That's a skill set that you can provide protocols for. Later, you go for yield and quality, so you provide the ripening protocols. At the right stage, what to do in order to improve the ripening process under the given conditions. In order to improve the number of panicles, you actually have reproductive protocols. So at some point in time, you augment the protocol with what is needed in order to get more energy into the grains, into the seeds, in order to have the best outcome. And then you also support, of course, with some of the agronomy that is necessary to actually have the vegetative protocols. What does it do? The value to the grower is straightforward. You increase yields, so that's obvious, 20%. As a matter of fact, we have now in Vietnam in particular, where this is very well established, the so-called 10-ton club. You saw this morning what are the average yields of rice around the world, somewhere around 4. These people are in the 10-ton club, so they produce 10 tons per hectare, and actually think of forming a new one, the 12-ton club, where they think that they actually come together in order to do that. It is improved quality. The head rise is 5% higher, so what is really the grain that is harvested. Labor savings and input savings, for that matter, only 4 to 6 applications if done properly. Profit improvement around 1/4. And very important, much less risk of losing the crop, and also important, a much better residue profile at the end, so less residues, controlled residue profiles at the end. Second example I want to use is already a bit more complicated. This is a cocoa producing environment. This is a cooperative in Ivory Coast that produces cocoa. Cocoa in Ivory Coast is yielding behind. There's lots of investments done in order to actually make that better. Lots of the initiatives, especially from the colleagues that actually buy the cocoa, are looking into improving the genetics of the cocoa trees as well. But you can do a lot just with better agronomy. The problem here is that if we come in with the technology and a technological solution, most of the cooperatives will not be able to afford it. They would have to pre-finance it, and they wouldn't have any guarantee that they will recoup their investments. So you have to partner with the value chain, with the traders that are actually out there in order to buy the stuff, and make a deal with them to train the farmers, to provide the input for the farmers, and to gain the financial security from the trader and not from the farmer. That makes the investment worthwhile for all parties. The benefit is there for everybody, there's no doubt, if it works, but you need to build up that trust, that network. A simple business model, but a business model that is not often used yet, unfortunately. What does it do? Within 2 years of starting that cooperation, you had 43 demonstration farms, typical way of disseminating. You had 100 master trainers, more than 70,000 growers involved, 780 spray operators trained, so they work safer than they used before. We are reaching some 40 cooperatives. I think in the meanwhile it's much, much more. And within only 2 years, a 40% yield increase, without changing the genomics, what takes longer. And that's what most of the investments go into at the moment. I'm not saying it doesn't need to be done, but in order to bridge the yield gap that you will have when you have to pull out some old trees to plant new genomic, this yield increase will help you bridge that period. Yes. Final example that I want to share is even more complicated. This is a farming community in Bangladesh, in northern Bangladesh. Farmers that grow various crops, many of them rice, some potato, some start testing with veggies. A very diverse growing community. Difficulties in accessing even local markets because they're remote. The infrastructure is not perfect. The education level or the capacity building has been neglected over too many years. And many of the farmers don't even own land, especially the women farmers in that part of the world have no access to own land in this case. If we want to actually improve productivity there, it becomes even more complicated. It's not just to provide the access to the markets, it is actually provide access to capacity building. You have to build capacity, you have to develop the community to have their self-managing capacity that they need. And this is far beyond what an input provider can do, as you can imagine. But if we want to actually help them, and they need our inputs to get there, we need to help to build those marketplaces. So the number of partners is much, much more. It includes NGOs. It includes us. The objectives are clear. You have to strengthen the objectives. You have to help the smallholders to actually become businessmen, so to have the agronomy and business acumen that you need in order to be successful. And you need to link these communities to markets, and not only sell markets, but also finance markets and other markets in order to make it possible. What we've developed is a nested level concept for that, because the first step, and that's what many do these days, is to actually provide the farmer hub. So it's a hub for them to conglomerate, to aggregate their input, and with that have a little bit better negotiation power with the buying community. The hub is typically a fully commercial organization. There's the community, if they do that, they do that. But they can't provide and they can't pay for the capacity building on their own. So you need to find a far more complicated model to actually cover those capacity building components as well. And what we are developing at the moment for that is essentially a franchise model. So those hubs could actually sign up to a franchise and would get the support for capacity building out of the franchise model. I already said, we are becoming kind of an NGO with this kind of approach, but it's an interesting business model. It is a real business model that can work. We are in the proof of concept at the moment. We will see how far it gets us, but if it works, it would, to me, become something like a truly sustainability trade path at some point in time. It's working well after only 1 year into this, and only very few hubs that are operational. We have 60 farmer groups, only 2 hubs after this first year. 60 farmer groups are set up. They have own savings now, and with this savings they can lease land, especially the landless women are doing that. Female participation is huge. It's great. 60 demo plots, 480 trainings held, so it's really providing something. Less use of pesticides, that's counterintuitive. It's not. They're using crap most of the time if they don't have access to the better stuff. It's a logical consequence of better seeds and better inputs that you reduce pesticide use. The fertilizer use is lower because they know better what they're doing, and the cropping distances are better organized. We have contract farming deals now, and the yield increase and the income increase speaks for themselves. So I'd like to come to a conclusion, and sorry for taking a little longer. She's getting nervous beside me. I'd like to summarize this with the 5 A's for sustainability in these business models. It links back to what I showed at the beginning, the farmer pain points. And you need to find, if you want to have a sustainable business, that's what we've learned through all our activities in this market now. You have to actually have these 5 A's established. If you don't, it's very likely that the business is going down the hill. It's not going to materialize. So you need to have the awareness about the agronomy, technology, the safety and efficiency. That's the typical stuff that we usually did. The affordability bit, something we can do, but more importantly, find financial solutions that actually support them in order to provide stable income. You need the aggregation, very important in order to achieve good prices in the market. You need these trading services so that you have the negotiation power. You need to coordinate planting and harvest. It's also very important to have the right stuff at the right time and the right volume at the right time in order to sell into bigger traders maybe. Availability of the retail network, of course, something we can do. And the tailored products, something we definitively do, and the knowledge on how to use them. And then, of course, the access to local and to high-value export markets. And too many of the programs are just focusing on the second bullet, the high-value export markets and not the local markets. And the reality is food security is achieved through local markets and not through the cash-generating value markets. And for that, you need market information at these trading centers if you want to do it. That's how we go about our smallholder markets. I hope it gives you a bit of an insight how complicated it is, but it works. Means that if these things actually work, the things that we discussed over the last 2 days, these new technologies, at some point in time will also get into those markets if we do it right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Juan. Now, our final speaker on the panel is Mark Matlock. Mark holds a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and a master's degree in polymer chemistry. And it's very curious that both Mark, Pierre, and myself have all worked in polymer chemistry at different points in our career. So Mark joined ADM in 1980. ADM, as you certainly know, is one of the largest agri-processors in the world. And Mark has worked in a variety of positions at ADM, and he's conducted research and patented in areas that we've discussed already several times in this conference. He's worked in soy protein isolates and led research efforts that led to the introduction of trans-free fats for margarines and shortenings via novel enzymatic rearrangement technologies. Currently, he serves as Senior Vice President of Research, where in this role he's responsible for directing food ingredient research for the company. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to talk about sustainably improving nutrition in the developing world.
Thank you, Anne. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to speak here today. I'm going to try and address 5 topics, and I'll try to move through these fairly quickly. Some of the things that you'll have already been pointed out by previous speakers in a very significant way, but a short intro to ADM. I don't have to beat on the growing demand for food. That's what this is all about, but how to grow more food, keep what we grow, and expand sustainable nutrition. So just a very quick bit about ADM. We're over 100 years old. We operate in 160 different countries. Our revenues range from 60 billion to 80 billion, depending upon commodity prices. And basically, we're processing the crops from the farmers that Pierre and Juan provide inputs to customers such as Nestle. So our purpose is to originate this grain, so we have elevator systems, somewhere over 500 elevators around the world. We operate about 3,200 barges on the Mississippi River. Well, there's 28,000 rail cars floating around North America, moving all these crops around. And then to get it across the world, we have about 50 ships that we either own or have under time charters. We're processing these commodities into food ingredients, feed ingredients, and also some industrial products. And then we also provide value-added ingredients that provide functionality, texture, taste, and nutrition for the food industry. So this is kind of a global map of our footprint. So you can see most of the dots are in the areas of the world where the grain and the oil seeds are originated, North and South America, Eastern Europe, various other locations, and we're moving it from where it's produced to where it's needed, and then processing some of it along the way. The other thing that you'll see at the very bottom, the red square, is Wilmar. That's the largest Asian agro-processor, and so they have palm oil, retail vegetable oils in China, and so it's just moving all these crops around to meet the need. And so part of the challenge for us, when we think about all this extra food that we're going to have to grow, we're going to have to grow infrastructure to transport it, to process it, and to get it in the hands of the food companies. So this global population, which we've talked about several different times, we've got a 21% increase in global population just by the year 2030. And when you look at where it's coming from, it's not Europe, very little from North America. It's largely Asia and Africa. And when you look at the land that they have for crop production, it's pretty limited. And so we've got to work hard to not only bring up their standards of growth, but also prevent what they may waste, but also make sure that we've got that we're transporting from the areas where there's a lot of excess. And if we look at the world on a global basis, and so the y-axis here is calories, The developed countries are doing fine on calories. The yellow line across the middle is the threshold for national food security. And in fact, our biggest problem is probably we're getting a few too many calories. The rest of the world is about, on average, okay, but the problem is there's regional disconnects. So sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia are substantially below the levels that they need for national food security. The other thing that's compounding some of this is that as developing nations acquire some affluence, they also shift in their taste. So they move from a rice diet to a meat diet. So that can either be chicken or swine or beef, and the conversion efficiency starts to play against you when you start shifting to this increased meat consumption. So part of my talk a little later, I'm going to talk about how we can extend these animal proteins with vegetable proteins to meet the need. So if you kind of look at, okay, so what level of this we're getting? From 1990 to 2015, we saw a 39% increase in population. There was a corresponding increase of about 29% in wheat production. Coarse grains went up about 55%. But if you go down to the bottom, all meat production went up 125%. So we went up 40% in population, but meat consumption went up 125%. And if you look at something specific like poultry, it's 280%. And so what that's causing is this increase in oilseed meals, and Dave Diziak talked about that this morning. So oilseed meals and soy meal in particular is going up by 200%. Those are products that have to be converted. The oil needs to be extracted in order for the meal to be fed to the animals. So this is all part of the issue that we have in feeding the world, is that their tastes are also changing. And then when you look at, okay, how much more land can we put in utilization, and this has been talked about as well, there's some land that we could begin to cultivate in Africa, some in Latin America, a little bit in Europe, but in places like North America, we're losing land. We're losing farmland to urban sprawl. So most of this productivity is not going to come from an increase in the amount of acres put into production or hectares put into production, but it's going to come from better yields from the seed guys, better fertilizer application, better technology, and also potentially using more of what we do produce. And so again, kind of looking at this shift from kind of how this land is used. Back in 1990, if you look at the purple bar, you can see the amount of land that was in oilseed production. By 2015, 2016, that purple bar has gotten substantially larger, and the total production continues to increase, but you can see that the wheat and the coarse grains are relatively stable in terms of the area that's being used for that production. The secret is going to be, as we've talked about all through this conference, we can improve the Western productivity as we continue to do, but where the biggest gains come from is helping the developing world bring their yields up. So if you look at the yields in Africa in coarse grains or in oilseeds or Asia, you can see doublings and possibly even more possible by moving some of our technology over there, but we have to adapt it to their environments. So one of the projects that ADM looked into in India, we have about 4 or 5 soybean crushing plants in India, as well as some sunflower processing. And we really needed an increase in the amount of sunflower available for a customer who was wanting to use sunflower oil in India for their business. So we worked with 240 sunflower growers, and what we put in place was micro-irrigation. Micro-irrigation is about 90 to 95% efficient when it comes to water. India has a problem with water, but it's seasonal. So the other part of this project is also working to develop rainwater harvesting and ponds where you can hold it until through the dry periods and then use it for things like micro-irrigation, or also we're partnering with them so that we have adequate supplies of water for what we're doing. So these sunflower fields, the one on the left, is a field under normal growing conditions prior to micro-irrigation. They basically often had crop failures in that particular area. We helped them install micro-irrigation, and this doubled the average yields that they were getting. And then also, we provided them access to a high oleic seed, which was what our customer was looking for, and that brought a premium in the marketplace. So they not only got more sunflower, but they were able to get a better price for it. So the way this worked, the cost of this equipment, this micro-irrigation, was about $760 per acre. The Indian government was helping. ADM put in some assistance. We got some discounts from the supplier, and there was a contribution from the farmer because we found that they need to have some investment in it. The way this impacts people, though, is really unique. The lady at the end that was impacted by this said, "What do you plan to do with this additional income?" And she said, "Now we can provide a better education to our son." So it's a chain, and people can lift themselves out of poverty with a little bit of help from both their government and from other parties. Another initiative that ADM instituted is a Institute for the Prevention of Post-Harvest Loss. This sits on the University of Illinois Urbana campus. The FAO says that roughly 1/3 of the food for human consumption is lost or wasted globally. This is 1.3 billion tons. And the pictures depict one of the areas where some of the major losses occur. If burlap bags are stored on the ground, they get wet, there's all kinds of pests and problems. So even something as simple as storing these bags on wood pallets under roof instead of outside on the ground can save a significant amount of crop. When we first started looking at this, it's kind of interesting. We thought, what they needed to go to is the same type of system in the rest of the world. Small grain bins, like we would have on a farm. They could have a little cooperative like that, like we would have an elevator cooperative. But the culture and everything was very difficult to put that sort of thing through. But just simple things like getting the bags off the ground on a pallet under roof makes a big difference. If you look through the post-harvest losses and look at where they're really significant, that open storage is a 5 to 10% area. The other one is village milling. And I really enjoyed one of the talks yesterday where they were talking about a simple $2 hand corn sheller that was much more efficient and minimizes some of these losses when you're taking the grain and threshing it in the traditional ways. The other thing that the Institute has worked toward, and I also saw this in the talk the other day, is just simple education. One of the projects is something called Scientific Animations Without Borders. And the problem is, some places the people are not able to read and write. They can speak, and they are able to kind of understand things, but so what this is little cartoons that play on a cell phone that are very low bandwidth, very low data. It's basically a cartoon, but it has a voice with it in various languages, and it teaches them things like, putting their burlap bags on wooden pallets that they can build, and how to build the pallets, and how to store it, and many other things. So I think there's a lot to be said for just that simple education. And the thing that's just amazing is how these cell phones are out there in the most remote areas that you can imagine. And so it's a great vehicle because they can be transmitted to them and easily played. The next topic I want to address is a little bit about how should we improve nutrition. Now, this is a USDA dietary guidelines chart, but you can see the big issues is we're getting too many refined grains in our diet. Dave talked about saturated fat needs to come down a bit, oils need to come up a bit, but the big ones in my mind are fiber, and then the fruit or the dairy and the seafood, which are really protein. And so how can we increase this protein, again, without a huge impact on the amount of grain that it takes to provide it? And the USDA points out that beans, nuts, and soy are a way to do that. And soy has been something, as long as I've been with ADM, we've been working on how to take a soybean and put it into, or convert it to a human food without having to go through an animal. So back in the late 1960s, Dr. Atkinson invented putting the soybean through an extruder, the defatted meal, to puff it and create a textured vegetable protein. In fact, the acronym TVP is a registered trademark of ADM's. So we continue to do work in this area, converting plant proteins directly into foodstuffs. The reason this is important is plant proteins, and this has been talked about earlier, require a lot less energy and produce a lot less greenhouse gases. If you look at the number of grams of protein produced per megajoule of energy or per kilogram of CO2, you can see that crops like soybean, edible beans, legumes like peas, all can provide many more grams of protein with a lot less impact on the environment. So also when we look at it from a land standpoint, in an acre of land, you can produce 346 pounds of protein with soy. Now the interesting thing, corn is also pretty good at this, and that's because of that C4 photosynthesis that we talked about before. It's able to convert to do a good job. So that's another great source when you're looking about productivity per land. The problem is the PDCAS score of corn proteins are pretty poor, and so again, as you feed that to animals, you need to supplement with the amino acids lysine, threonine, and tryptophan and methionine. Pulses are also very good at producing a lot of protein per acre of land. The other impact is water. So when you consume a pound of hamburger to feed your family, you're also consuming about 1,800 gallons of water in that beef. If you decide, well, we'll switch to pork tonight, you cut that water in half. If you switch to chicken, you cut it in half again. But if you have a meatless meal, you're down at numbers like 216, or in the case of pulses, even as low as 43. So I think this is going to be part of the solution going forward. I'd just like to close with this point, but innovation is going to be not only just seed, crop, but it's also how we convert these grains and oil seeds into foods to create foods that taste good, that have the right texture, that have the right nutrition, and that's a big part of our research these days. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you very much, Mark. And now we're going to move on into the discussion. So,
Your microphone. I think he's going to plug it.
good. So I think I'm on now. So we're going to go into the panel discussion. So please come to the microphone for your questions. Morris, you're going to kick off? Great.
And thank you all three panelists for excellent presentations and some very thought-provoking ideas. Now, if I could just start with Pierre, a question for you, Pierre, because it's very clear if we can get fertilizer into the hands of smallholder farmers, let's say in sub-Saharan Africa, it's very clear we can make a big impact with that. The difficult part, of course, is the sustainability, the economic sustainability of doing it. There was in Malawi, when Mrs. Banda was president of Malawi, I think there was about a 5-year program there where she was able to get donors to provide money to pay for fertilizer, and it was a roaring success in terms of the increased yields of maize and I'm just trying to remember, probably maize and rice in Malawi. But of course, when the donor money disappeared, then it was very difficult to turn that into a sustainable venture, despite the fact that it was very successful. Now, I saw from your graph there that the profit went up absolutely substantially there when they were using nitrogen fertilizer in a well-controlled manner. I think there was about a fourfold increase in profit there. So I guess my question is there a good likelihood that in that scenario, the farmers would then reinvest a block of that profit for fertilizer, which is a substantial cost. They'd still be making a lot of money compared to what they were, and then it turns into a sustainable cycle.
So I did not go into that much of detail during the presentation, but if I take the example of Mbeya, one of the lead farmers, we always start with the lead farmers and then the community. In less than 3 years, so he reinvested year after year. He multiplied, I would say, his yield in a consistent way. His daughter is going to secondary school, and the family and all the village is continuing to develop according to the model. So that has generated an investment very close by of a small or medium-sized storage warehouse with the rice transformation equipment, and that has itself generated more profit. So a small bank is coming a couple of times a week there. It's a mobile truck. People are starting trading. The farmers are bringing their rice to the warehouse. They can keep it there, sell it to the retailer, or keep it there, just pay a fee, and going further. And what you see here is the beginning of something with reinvestment. We are making business, so it's not donation. We had really an initiative or a catalytic start, but it's working very well.
And I think one that's also similar for some of the other inputs and seeds that you described.
Yeah, you can typically see this working very well if they can sell. If they can't, then of course it's doomed to fail. But in most places, if they have the possibility to easily access and without too many losses to access some of the local markets or other markets, then those initial transformations work quite well.
It's creating that initial commercial cycle that then can very well be sustainable. Okay, can you go ahead, please?
Yes, first of all, congratulations to all three of you. Often multinational companies are treated unfairly, certainly in the media, but you are providing value chain models, pricing models that allow farmers to make money, which they will spend on improvements and education and progress and efficiency. So I sincerely congratulate you, because other people aren't doing this as much as you are. So, I mean, I endorse what you're doing, because you're bringing a market intelligence and a market value chain system in various ways, alternate models, but they're working, to people who really need it. So, number one, congratulations, and I enjoyed your presentations. Number two, do you run into this, as we call it now, the European problem, where they're trying to convince farmers not to use genetically engineered products? And none of you mentioned it, but do you find that you're in that battle, or is it exaggerated, or what are your views on that in terms of do you encounter it, and then how do you deal with it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks. It's good to hear that somebody appreciates what we do. It's not my daily business, unfortunately. In the markets, yes, we see that problem. In particular in Africa, we see it a lot. There's so much skepticism, there is so much concern of not being able to sell into Europe that it can become an inhibitor of adaptation of better technologies. That's something that we are facing. We heard the golden rice example. We've been involved in the golden rice development. We handed it over to Erie, who is trying to get it into the market. The only reason it's not getting fast into the market is this genetic engineering fear that comes with it. That's one part of the equation. That's the influence, the undue influence that you have through this fear-mongering environment that we have. Some really fearing not being able to trade in Europe. That's a big issue. But you have other elements that add to that. So I don't want to blame just the Europeans for that. You know, you have within those countries, especially in Africa, policy issues that are equally difficult. They have cross-border trading barriers from one country to another that are totally unnecessary or not helpful. That makes it difficult to get a better seed hybrid from A to B. Some want to breed all their own, so they only want to have seeds sold that are bred within their own territory, what makes it very difficult to even get some demo plots up and running or to produce enough to test the market. It is fairly complicated to do something, not just on GM, also on other stuff.
Yeah, I would say, you know, it's a big issue for us. In India, the only GMO that's allowed is cotton, and so all the soy there is non-GMO. China, it's really the same thing in terms of what they grow. And then I'll tell you what really is beginning to concern me as much as some of the developing countries and some of their limitations is the attitude that's changing in places like the U.S. I mean, you know, we kept thinking, well, Europe is going to change in another 5 years. They'll become comfortable with the technology, and it just is another 5 years and another 5 years. And then now, you know, we've got this Vermont situation where we've got customers that they can't just label GMOs in one state. They have to change their packaging throughout the country. It's just, so part of my concern is just where it's all going, even in the developed world. The other comment I would make is it greatly complicates our supply chain issues. In North America, where we produce soy proteins, we operate one of our facilities about 1/3 of the time on non-GMO that we have contract grown and we identity preserve and all that stuff. But we have to, you know, have, you know, one inventory of these are all the products we make in non-GMO. Here's all the same products in GMO. We have to test them. We test, you know, it's just tremendous cost and complication. And you know, it would, and I really enjoyed Rob last night. I think it is time for us to push back and to be more vocal about the benefits of biotechnology all over the world, not just the developing nations, but also maybe most of all in the developed world.
Yeah. Well, well said. I certainly endorse that, and I suspect going forward, even from this meeting, Morris, that we're going to see people in the scientific community and in the value chain start to speak up and coordinate their efforts right through to cabinet ministers and even in negotiating trade deals. Yeah. Because it's a hammer that's necessary, and we got to speak up, and then you've got to take a stand. So appreciate your views and your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Okay. Yes? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I come from IITA in Nigeria, and it was a breath of fresh air listening to these three gentlemen. In fact, what is actually required is not just technology, but also these value chains and very successful implementations of these value chains so the farmers, they can actually have these technologies, who have the technologies, can have access to the markets through the right policies and through the right institutions to get to what they actually need, which is basically not only money for their families, but also good food for their own, for the entire community. I just want to mention a couple of things. When I heard about your experience about Syngenta, there is a very successful new farm franchise example that is currently in operation in Nigeria, and it's called Babangona. And they have been growing from 100 farmers in the first year to 6,000 farmers this year. And they have what you call as the small groups, so what they call the trust groups. They have these groups of 8 to 10 farmers who come together. And this organization It provides training, it provides inputs at low cost, it provides continuous monitoring, it provides farm services. And then at the end of the season, they help to aggregate and store. But one of the key things is that the smallholder farmers, and all of them are smallholder farmers, the smallholder farmers, they require cash. And so they actually make a payout at different times to ensure that the farmers have the cash. And at the end of the season, they actually target the high-value market and also local markets. And in fact, one of their markets is actually Nestle. All the orange maize that Nestle uses in their plant comes from that particular group. Okay? And they're expanding that now. So these kind of examples can be really powerful in terms of driving technologies in the smallholder farming situations. Another thing that I want to mention is that I was really happy to see the food safety initiative of ADM. And I was part of that FAO conference. And this is a great initiative. And I think most people, when they talk about productivity. But I think productivity without food safety, you can have a large amount of food, but if it's not safe, you have a food security issue.
Yeah.
And therefore, food safety is an important component. And the last point that I want to make is that many organizations or many farm services are there in Africa. They want to go into this. We work with about 26 such farm advisories. But one of the major problems is financing. So financing is one of the critical issues in African value chain system, because without financing, these businesses can't actually take off. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think we have to mention the pioneering work done at IITA in the area of youth agripreneurship. They've set up there a business incubator to encourage young, underemployed graduates to start businesses in agriculture and the agri-food area. And I think this is really a lighthouse for certainly the rest of Africa. So congratulations on that so far.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
A large part of my experience comes from a multinational input company. And so I really appreciate that you guys are doing projects in favor of smallholders, as one of you called it. And I know that from my own experience that what you are doing is very often much better than your public reputation. As it relates to smallholders, this discussion is about the role which companies like yours can play, and obviously examples from the tropics and from developing countries are very important here, and you have used them all. But I would like to refocus a little bit on Canada. There's also needs here. I mean, besides the industrial agriculture, which we all have and enjoy with great productivity, there's still a few challenges for small companies, and I would like to mention one of them. For example, we are all learning towards the transition from chemical agriculture towards biological agriculture. And organic production is, of course, something, although you make your money in both ways, obviously, but organic production is, of course, something which also has its obstacles. We are producing, for example, one of the finest starch which is commercially available. And I have been told it would be great to produce it in organic fashion. However, it is very difficult with weed control and other means. So, for example, we are making progress with digital agriculture and mechanical weed control, which 20, 30 years ago we all heard about, knew about, but which wasn't so feasible, becomes much more feasible now because of the software, because of the imaging technology, because of satellite technology and so on. So this is something which is not always or mostly not available to small farmers, nor is it available to small companies. And the introduction of these very new high-tech mechanical weed control means would be great progress towards the production of high-quality products. And Companies
I
like
think
yours
you need
might
to
have...
come to a close, please, because the session will soon be finishing. What is your question precisely?
Well, it's basically the input that companies like yours have the power to make this kind of a technology happen, even for smaller players in the industrialized world.
Yeah, maybe on this one, for instance, you saw like the end sensor made in Germany, so not really necessarily cheap, and but high quality. So we also have programs now really to diffuse and going to different platforms that are, I would say, just adapted to smaller farm units, even up to smallholder farmers in the future. So we are looking at different. There is a plan in that direction.
May I add to that as well? I may be a little bit off track, but since you mentioned it, that's also important. There is a difficulty in developing specifically for certain small markets. And you mentioned organic for that matter. I would love to produce something for organic market, more than we already do. Around 20% of our stuff is already in there, but I would like to do more. But we don't have any planning security there. You know, I don't know what technology they will allow because it is a totally intransparent process of what inputs are allowed and what inputs are not allowed. So until this whole thing becomes more scientific and accept certain parameters that we can actually develop for, it's going to be difficult to develop for such markets. That's something, another discussion to be held and linked to the discussion that we had yesterday. You know, there is nobody not thinking that the ideals that this organic brings aren't good ideals. I would sign up for that immediately. If there wouldn't be this smoke screen about what is the reality in the background and what are the inputs that are used and how are these inputs selected on what criteria, that is totally intransparent. So developing something for those markets, and I've tried several times, and in Switzerland we have one of the few institutes that actually dedicates itself to organic innovation. We can't do much because they are not allowed to do anything either. So that's one of the complications in that environment.
I would just add one thing. Organic is something that we've started to support in terms of some companies that we've acquired. We have one company called Specialty Commodities. So if you want organic quinoa or chia or just, you know, a wide range of edible beans, different things, we do provide that, and that is a growing market. The other thing is in something like soy, it's a little bit difficult because a traditional soy plant is a 50,000 bushel a day facility. So another company we recently acquired is called Harvest Innovations, and they do organic soy through expeller pressed systems. So if you're also seeking proteins that did not utilize a solvent like hexane, but you want to have you want to produce organic soy milk, something like that, we do have ingredients for that market as well. And it's this combination of trying to accommodate the large scale, cost efficient with the small scale specialty that is somewhat challenging, and it takes two different mindsets.
Boris, last question.
So I just want to go in a slightly different direction, follow up on what Mark was talking about with respect to vegetable protein versus animal protein. As you pointed out, TVP has been around for, I remember when I was an undergraduate, that was available. So it's been around for a long time. And I also, you know, I lived in California, I've lived a few places around the world. The offerings in the supermarket for like tempeh burgers and stuff haven't really changed that much in 20 years. So my question is, as we begin to see the burgeoning middle class coming in Asia that will have the money to buy a whole range of different foods and probably will sort of orient themselves to more meat than they currently eat. Is it a marketing problem for us that we've not figured out how to substitute vegetable protein in that meat market, or is it more of a technical problem that we still haven't got the right products to make people say, I would love to have that, rather than one meal a week, substitute one meal a week with vegetable protein rather. I can never figure out whether it's a marketing issue, you know, we haven't really pitched it appropriately, or do we need to do something technically to make that more attractive?
Well, historically, the biggest Achilles heel that soy has had is taste, okay? And we've worked very hard to make it blander and blander, but in the end, even if it's bland, it still doesn't taste like dairy, okay? So one of the recent acquisitions we made was a company called Wild Flavors. So we recognized that we need to be able to be experts at flavoring, and if you have a flavor going into a dairy protein product, that's a completely different flavor than what you would need to go for a soy protein or some other protein. So that's one part of the equation. The other part is there are regions of the world, the simplest thing is to think about, well, if you want to make this dairy milk less expensive, you can extend it with soy. You have the soy's bland, the dairy's providing the flavor. It's a way to extend the protein base. But in some countries like India, mixing soy protein and dairy protein is actually illegal. It's adulteration. And so part of it's regulatory, part of it's taste, part of it is technology. On the meat analogs, there's been a lot of advances in the last few years, and there's a lot of people working on next generation things that I think are going to be really outstanding in the very near future.
Yeah, I can only echo that. We have a very significant program on plant proteins, looking at using, first of all, the newly available sources, like the soy protein isolates, pea proteins, but then moving through looking how we can better use waste products. Some of the oil cakes, they contain a lot of protein. How can they be used in the future? And then on to the more advanced things like algae and leaf proteins. But there's certainly some very exciting products coming along in the pipeline. I was at a workshop organized by Al Gore and his investment company recently, and we tasted milk based on pea protein that tasted just like milk, and I'm very sensitive to that, and a beef burger that looked and tasted like a beef burger. So there's some incredible things coming along in the pipeline. Last question, please.
Thank you. We know MNCs are driving the consumer preferences and changes in the consumer preferences, including the smallholder farmers. And it has driven a lot of change in the land use by them. I come from the same place what you were mentioning from India, and in last 2 decades, government has actually changed. I mean, they have forced soybean to grow so much that they have stopped growing the traditional crops. And it has affected their food security. And the farmers are daily committing suicides there because soybean doesn't feed them. They don't eat soybean grain.
Right.
The leaves, the livestock doesn't eat the soybean leaves, whereas earlier they used to grow sorghum,
Yep.
which used to provide them at least fodder plus food security during famine. So what kind of systemic intervention you can do as a private industry rather than the sporadic intervention that you mentioned right now?
Sure. One of the things that we were looking at when commodity prices were really high a couple years ago, corn was at $8 a bushel, was taking some technology that we had looked at for taking the stover and making it easier for enzymes to digest. Well, the treatments were relatively simple. It was basically lime and a little bit of thyme, and you could improve the digestibility of that stover by as much as 50%. So we started a project in Dharwad where we were working with a local university looking at improving the output of buffalo milk by taking corn stover, which they were already feeding the buffalo, but if we used these pre-treatments to make the cellulose more bioavailable, because these are creatures that were evolved to digest grass in the pasture, so if we can help them along, we can get much more effective use of that biomass. And so that was one of the projects that we looked at, to improve basically how that fodder is consumed by those animals.
So are you guys funding to the novel innovators who are finding novel food products which would use the local produce so that it can incentivize even the local produce like sorghum, finger millet, and they also keep on growing the crops of your own
Yeah.
requirement.
We have quite a lot of work going on in this area. We introduced recently in South Africa a noodle with morinaga, a very rich green leafy vegetable, into the noodles. We don't do any plant science work on the staple crops, but we really focus on areas where there's not much other investments going on. And one of them is in cassava, particularly looking at propagation techniques, because these are very prone to disease, and with really much better propagation techniques, we can give much more healthy cassava stocks to smallholder farmers. So these are just a couple of examples. We've got products based on millet, for example, for all family cereals. So there's a lot going on in this area.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we're drawing to a close now, and as you know, the food industry is under significant criticism and questioning right now. But I think you've seen through the panel discussion and the presentations the important role that the actors represented here play in mobilizing technologies into the developing world. And this crucial role in implementing solutions to provide food and nutrition security. So please join me in thanking all our speakers. Thank you. Put it off.
Dinner? Yeah. I think we had a good question and answer session.
Yeah, no. Thank you.